Hello, I'm Mike Graziano, and welcome to my music channel. Not too long ago, I posted a series of videos showing you how to compose the first movement of a symphony. We composed it together. It's a classical symphony subtitled The Cute. I showed you step by step all the choices, all the layers, and it wasn't that hard. You can do this too. That's the most important lesson. I've spent decades studying music, studying scores, learning composition, learning orchestration. Now I have all this stuff packed into my head, this skill set. What am I going to do with it? What good is it? The magic of YouTube is that I can tell you, I can teach other people, spread it around a little, so the knowledge can do some good in the world. Whether you want to compose music or just look under the hood and see how it's put together to gain a better appreciation for it. Maybe these videos can be useful and enjoyable. I chose the classical style, let's say from 1780 Vienna, because it makes a good tutorial. That's where the foundational principles of the symphony and the art of orchestration were established. Later symphonies, even massive, complicated ones, rest on that foundation. Understand the classical symphony, and you have an insight into all symphonies. After 5 videos, we got through the process together and finished a nice little 6-minute first movement. Many of you seem to like it, and a few of you asked for a second movement. Second movements are not like first movements. They're special things that require special care. So I thought I would do that, make a new video series and walk you through writing the second movement of a light classical symphony, really the blueprint for all symphonic slow movements ever since. In creating these videos, I face a conundrum. As we work through the composition, you don't get to the final product until you've watched through an hour's worth of video. That's a lot of investment before you see whether the product's worth anything. So this time I'll try an experiment and start by playing the completed, fully orchestrated movement. It's only about 5.5 minutes. Just right to follow that light, cheerful first movement that we composed last time. You'll see the full score scrolling past. I'll add a few comments throughout, flashing up on the screen. And after you've watched through the movement, I think some of you may be happy with that and move on with your day. A second movement has a thoughtful, calm, almost meditative feeling, and maybe it will make you a little bit happier during your day. But if you want to know how to compose a second movement, how to build it layer by layer, it turns out it's very simple, and anyone can do it. Or if you're just curious, maybe you don't want to write one yourself, but you want to see how it's put together, then please continue on through the series of videos. So here now is the second movement of our classical symphony. It'll take about 5 minutes, and then I'll come back and we'll talk more. I hope you enjoyed that. Before we get into the composition, let's talk about the purpose of a second movement. The symphony evolved out of a thing in the Baroque period called a suite, a set of small movements, usually simple dances. And you'd have faster dances intermixed with slow dances, anywhere from 3 to 8 in a suite, often 6, that was a standard number. The suite evolved into larger orchestras, the Baroque concertos, like the famous Bach-Brandenburg concertos. Those have a fast movement to catch your attention, a slow movement to give you a rest, and a fast movement to finish it off, typically 3 movements. Those are not symphonies yet, for a whole variety of reasons, but they're the precursors. The symphony emerged in the early classical period, right after the Baroque period. And here are some of the ways that the symphony is different. First, in a Baroque concerto, you think about the first movement of the Bach-Brandenburg Concerto No. 2. The whole movement has one tune, one mood, all the way through. It's monochrome. The contrast in melody, in mood, in emotional feel is achieved across different movements, not within one movement. So one movement is a sunny day, the next movement is a rainstorm or a calm night. I think that approach pushed composers toward short movements and toward a lot of movements to cover more emotional ground. But in the classical period, you have this innovation suddenly taking over. One movement has several different melodies, each with its own mood and feel, and the movement is therefore constantly changing, like constantly changing weather. I think that would have confused the heck out of the Baroque composers. Internal contrast, packing a whole musical journey into one movement. A second major innovation in the classical period is the method of orchestration. In the Baroque period, you obviously had orchestras, but they were treated differently. You might have a flute playing a long melody for 8 measures, and then you might have the oboe playing a counter melody under the flute for the same 8 measures. They both play along together, and you can enjoy the combination of their sounds. But in the classical period, you start to see composers paint with sound. The flute comes in just for a few notes, dabbing in a bit of color. Then the oboe pops in for a moment, enhancing a musical phrase. The horns hang in the background, giving a kind of majestic aura, but you no longer try to make one instrument always play through an entire melody. Again, that dabbing of instruments here and there would have been very confusing to the Baroque sensibility. These 2 changes, giving each movement intricate, multiple themes and internal contrast, and treating orchestration like a painter's palette, these really made the symphony. And essentially, by trial and error, composers converged on how many movements should go into a symphony, typically 4. The first movement is lively, the tunes are catchy, it announces and establishes the piece. The second movement is a meditation, a quiet interlude, a kind of restfulness. The third wakes you up a little. It's typically a dance, nothing too fast, nothing too slow, just a nice upbeat dance, very often the shortest movement. And the final movement can be fast or loud and triumphant, a kind of fireworks, a spectacle to finish it all up. Not every symphony follows that pattern. Composers were always pushing the boundaries, bending the rules, but for some reason that may never be fully explained, that combination of movements works. It's a wonderful mystery. That combination of 4 movements feels right. It feels complete. And it dominated the symphony from early classical composers like C.P.E. Bach in 1740, all the way through 200 years to Shostakovich in the 1950s. And still today, when composers write symphonies, that 4-movement structure works. Insert here your favorite counterexamples. Some Mozart's symphonies are 3 movements. One of Beethoven's has 5 movements. Schubert's 8th has 2 movements. That's because he didn't finish it. Not that I'm in the same echelon, but my own 8th and 9th symphonies have only 1 movement each. But for this tutorial, we'll stick with the common standard approach, which means our second movement is going to be gentle and pretty. A classical second movement usually has a very simple organization. Our first movement, you may remember, was in sonata form, arguably the most intellectually complex, intricate organization. It really shows off your composer chops. And almost all first movements, 99% of them, are in that form. Second movements have more variety. You'll find some in sonata form, some are theme and variations, but a second movement is more often in a simple song form. A song form is just an alternation of tunes, nothing more. Its simplicity helps to bring out that quiet, meditative, relaxed feel. For example, you can have a 3-part song form, a nice melody that we'll call part A, a second melody that we'll call part B, and then a repeat of A. It's so simple, anyone can do this. Another common form is a rondo, which is really just extending the 3-part form. Add a 3rd tune, part C, and then return to A. You can go on if you want a really long movement, and add a 4th tune, a D part, and so on, always coming back to A. We don't have a giant, ambitious symphony. The first movement is already very short and cute, so I don't think we want a massive second movement. Let's shoot for a simple rondo form with 3 tunes. Once we come up with the 3 tunes that we like, A, B, and C, we'll have a whole movement sketched out, and we'll be ready to orchestrate. The deep reason for such simplicity is that you're trying to avoid ego, avoid showing off how clever you are. The second movement should be generous. It tries to give the world some simplicity and calm. With all of that discussion, I think we're ready to start composing the second movement. I filmed the process of composing it, so in the next video we'll go back in time to a blank score and we'll walk through the whole process together. I do hope you'll come along with me, and thank you for watching.